Hi, Andre. Okay. So we are setting up all the stuff even to get all the live stream on Facebook ready, and as soon as everything is established and all people are in, we're gonna start. If you have any questions, sorry?
We are live.
Ricardo, I was curious how Nicaragua was. What reports is he getting?
But well, yeah, I mean, having chats with some of the producers there and some of the ones we met, coming back from after the Semana Santa, I mean, at least before that, at least in terms of the commerce and being able to trade and so on, that was looking positive. On the more important side of things, at least on the human side, we've had 3 deaths since the whole pandemic began. So I think within the big context of how countries are being impacted and human lives lost, fortunately, Nicaragua has been only 3 deaths and only 11 people so far have been taken ill by it. So knock on wood, things keep on going that way. But I know Central America as a whole, they're working quite closely together on this one. I assume there's a lot of that work together as well in the cigar trade and the tobacco trade. But so far so good. I would think how bad it could be.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. Yeah, it's real impressive, man. The numbers we're seeing from Nicaragua are impressive. You know, if they're reliable, it's incredible. It's a great job. Great job.
Ricardo, it's such a pleasure to have you on the call yet again. And Christian Eiroa, I'm more than pleased and honored to welcome you to the Light 'em Up Lounge. Such a pleasure you're joining us. We are already live on Facebook, so hello to all the wonderful people joining us over there. We're live on the Cigar Journal fan page and my personal one as well. And we have plenty of people joining us here in the lounge, and there's many more coming in. Christian, such a pleasure to have you on the call. How are you?
Doing well, Reinhard. Very, very well. Thank you for having me. And Reinhard, I have to ask, the smoking jacket, man, where did you get it? Tell us about your jacket.
From an Austrian manufacturer. Yeah. Well, you know, you got to dress up for the occasion, right?
Okay.
But most importantly, the real beauty is the one I'm going to be smoking. So
thank you, sir.
Thanks to Johan, who is doing a wonderful job bringing your beautiful products to Austria. We got to enjoy these delights for tonight. And yeah, as always, just to let you know, all the people joining us here at the lounge, please put your comments, your questions, all your thoughts into the chat box. And for all the people joining us live on Facebook, please feel free to share some of your thoughts and your comments underneath the live video, or you can also shoot a direct message to either myself, the journal, or Sabina, and we will make sure that all your voices are being heard. Christian, without further ado, I'm going to light up my cigar, and I would love to start with a little bit of your background history. I mean, most of the people here will know exactly who you are, what you've been doing, but for the 2 people who are joining us tonight that do not know a little bit more about the story of Christian Eiroa, how did you ultimately end up where you are right now with Eiroa Cigars, with CLE, with Asylum?
Yeah, thank you for asking, man. The story is actually a pretty interesting story because this is exactly the last place where I wanted to be. It was coming into the family business, which I tried to avoid. For many years, I saw my father working with my older brother, and we're 6 years apart. And I remember just seeing those battles all the time. I said, no way. There's no way I'm going to work with my father. And, I finished university. I got my master's degree in international business, and I said, yeah, maybe I should go work with my father for 6 months. And that was back in June 28th, 1995. This is my 25th year. And but our history is a very interesting history. My grandfather was from Spain, from Viveiro. It was either Vigo or Lugo, Spain, and he moved to Cuba. And probably the turn of the century, late 1880s, 1890s, we don't know exactly when. And he bought his first. He was a ship captain, so he used to transport tobacco up and down in Cuba. So it was, I think, 1916 is when we estimate that he bought his first farm. And back then, the way it would work in Cuba is you would pay a family to grow tobacco for you, and these people would be your partners, so to speak. I think you would pay them they would keep 25% of your sales, if I remember correctly. And, unfortunately, my grandfather died in 1951. My father was still fairly young. He was only 14 years old. And my father had an older brother, and he had a younger brother. He was the middle one of three. And it was, of course, they had to leave Cuba in 1959 because when Fidel Castro came in, they wanted my grandmother to start wearing a patch on her arm and start walking up and down the neighborhood and spying on people. So they said, let's go to Tampa, and we'll spend the summer in Tampa. And when everything passes, we'll come back to Cuba. It'll be maybe just for the summer. They didn't know that the summer was going to turn into 60-something years now. So, and the family that took us in was the Oliva family, not the cigar people, the tobacco people. Angel Oliva, who really was the architect of the cigar industry outside of Cuba. When the embargo was established in 1962, all the tobacco leaf that was coming in from Cuba was no longer available in the marketplace, right? So Angel Oliva had a bunch of people try to do a bunch of experiments in different areas. And my father had just gotten out of the U.S. Army, because my father actually joined the movement for the Bay of Pigs invasion. My father really, first he was pro-Fidel. And when they realized the movement wasn't what they thought it was, they wanted Batista out. But then when Fidel came in, they realized it was a different system than what they wanted. They left. So my father actually joined the Bay of Pigs invasion. Fortunately, he never landed. And at that time, so when he got out of the U.S. Army, when he was in Korea, he got out of the U.S. Army. Angel Oliva was doing a bunch of experiments in different countries. So my father was asked to go to Honduras. He was 24 years old. And Angel Oliva is the one who said that the tobacco from Honduras was the closest to anything that they tasted before from Cuba. So the filler from Honduras would be a great tobacco that could be used for the leaf manufacturers, for the machine-made cigar manufacturers that were in Tampa at the time. But back then, Nicaragua, and I'm glad that Ricardo's on. Nicaragua was very smart about developing the trade, because Nicaragua saw this opportunity back then, and it really was. If you were from Cuba, they would ask you, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Cuba." "Okay, listen, we're going to give you 5 acres. We're going to give you a tractor. We're going to give you a credit line." And Nicaragua actually did a great job also in developing their tobacco trade for many years. Matter of fact, still today, I get very jealous at how Nicaragua developed their industry, because in Honduras, they still kept growing corn. Nicaragua really dedicated a lot of their farm space to entrepreneurship and tobacco growing for many, many years. So, as the years go on, I ended up in the business, and I love it. I really, I grew up in the farms. I learned how to drive tractors when I was 7, 8 years old, driving Jeeps. I grew up around all the workers. My weekends and my week were all spent on the farm. I would do things that, I think about it now, and it's just absolutely crazy. Back then we had the crop dusting planes. So whenever the crop duster would land, from fumigating the field, just listen to my story. And I was probably 7 or 8 years old. My older cousin, he would say, "Hey, Christian, let's go hang from the wing while the guy taxis over the hangar." And I used to love the smell of the poison. So I used to just hang from the top of the wing while the airplane was taxiing. And sometimes the pilot will be like, if I was watching the guy take off, I would say, "Hey, can I go with you?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." So these crop dusting planes, they have a small space behind the seat, enough to fit probably like a book bag. And I was so small, I would sit there while the guy is doing everything. I just think now, I live in the neighborhood we live in. My wife won't even let my kids that are 12, 13 ride a bicycle, and here I am sitting in the guy's airplane doing all kinds of crazy things, man. So it was a different life, different times, but all these memories are all around tobacco and tobacco farms. Sorry,
Christian,
I don't know if
that
you wanted
bring
to
up
for a short one.
that memory part and the family stories. I was actually wondering, besides the poisonous stuff that you mentioned, do you have some of these sensory memories still with you, be it from your grandfather's side, or from the family, from the farms? Do you have some of these lasting memories when it comes to sensory, and do you still work them into your cigars in order to sort of replicate these childhood memories?
It's funny you mentioned that, and smell really is a very powerful sense. Yes, So our school year, I think it's similar in Europe, and I think Nicaragua used to be the same way. Our school year starts in February and ends in November, right? For schools. The U.S. system, of course, now goes from, I don't know, September to June, but back then Honduras was from February through November. And when I was taking the time off from vacation, again, I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, I would ask for work. And I remember that timesheet. I used to love stamping my time card every day. And what the workers would do, because I was the boss's son, and I probably wasn't nice to be around because they probably had to be careful when I was there, they would make me work in the pilones when we're doing fermentation. And when the fermentation is very strong, these pilones produce a lot of ammonia. And it's a very rough smell to be around. So these guys would put me in that room, hoping that I would just leave and go home. But I actually really enjoyed the smell. I'm telling you, something was wrong, and clearly it's affected me now that I'm older, because this smell also, I remember it. If you guys imagine what that smells like, for those of you guys that are American football fans, imagine Troy Aikman every time he got a concussion, that stuff that they would put under his nose. That's exactly what tobacco smells like when it's going on through fermentation. The ammonia smell is very, very powerful. So yeah, man. So I remember those smells. And matter of fact, I just made a cigar now called Wynwood Hills, because I used, it's a factory we don't own. Scandinavian Tobacco owns it. Now it was the old U.S. tobacco factory that my father built, and I went to that factory, and I remember walking through it when it was being built in 1976 or 77, and I just had to make a cigar there at that factory because it brought all those memories. So yeah, man, there definitely are a lot of memories, and everything that I do is always tied to something that I felt or smelt or thought about at the time when I was much younger.
Now, on one of our last sessions, we had John Huber from Crowned Heads joining us, and he actually said that it feels like he got his undergrad degree, or he finished his undergrad education with CAO, and then Crowned Heads was sort of his stepping up and the next level with his graduation. Do you feel the same way with your evolution from Camacho over to your own brands and joining the family business?
Oh yeah, listen, absolutely. It's I'll tell you, many years ago we were trying to do business with CETA back in 1996, 97. CETA, of course, the French monopoly. Back then there were a lot of transactions. Europeans, there was a disbalance with the currency, and the US dollar was a good price. So European companies were buying a lot of our companies. So I spent a lot of time with CETA because they were looking to buy our operation at the time. And I remember the Stanilas Verlas, the guy, I think he's still there on the financial side. The companies go through many different eras. He's like, hey, we went through a manufacturing era, a marketing era, and now we're in a financial era. In this industry, I was able to live many different eras. When I came in 1995, it was a cigar boom, right? So we couldn't get enough tobacco. And I was only 22, 23 years old. And one thing I have to explain, my father in 1977 had an airplane accident. It was in a wheelchair. So I always grew up in boarding schools, and I spent a lot of time in Europe when I was small. I spent a lot of time I graduated from military school. So I was really thrust into adulthood at a very young age. So when I came into the company when I was 22 or 23, I immediately noticed the gap that we didn't have enough tobacco. And I spent a lot of my time traveling all over the world and really learning how cigars are made, how the cigar boxes are made, how tobacco is grown in many different countries, different ideas, different concepts. And at that age, you're just so absorbent, right? You're like a sponge, and you want to learn a lot. And I didn't care if I was on the road for 5, 6 weeks at a time. I just wanted to find pretty women and then figure out a way to get a lot of tobacco to grow and to grow the company. So, back then, and then the cigar boom crashed in 1997. So we went from a crash to a crash in November 97. So we went to a pickup phase, building the company. We came out with the Camacho Corojo at the time, which was a game changer. We reintroduced the Corojo seed, which had been abandoned by Cuba. And I learned a lot from that company, from those operations, and from branding. Even when we sold the company to Davidoff, which those people were extremely nice, and we learned a lot from these guys, especially branding. So yeah, I agree with what you said about what John Huber said. Of course, man, you learn from every experience, and also depends at the age that if you're willing to learn it and if you're open to it.
Now, would you say that if you would have started right away within the family company, it would have been a totally different story, or it would probably have never worked out the way it did now, when actually you had to pave your own path first and start with a totally different company and different people, and only then sort of morph back into that family role?
Yeah, you know, that's a really good question. And that's something that we argue about with my sister and my nephew and, you know, my brother and my nieces, which my father always believed that you need to work somewhere else first. Because once you work in the family business, there's a certain barrier. I don't have the respect for him as a boss, and he doesn't have that respect for me as an employee. So also, I need to come in with ideas and form myself from the outside and learn different styles and see what's right. Because if you come into the company and you're really just learning what my father's willing to teach me, then we never really progressed. There was no evolution. No evolution occurred. So, yeah, 100%. I needed to go somewhere else. I needed to come into this operation. And what helped me also was, you know, my brother was a big factor in the sense that we've always been very competitive as a family. And the fact that he told me I wasn't going to do a good job just pissed me off even more. It made me work harder.
I heard this, or I read the statement of yours where you said, like, when you started with your own brand, with Eiroa Cigars, with CLE, and even with Asylum, you asked yourself that question: what would you do differently if you were to start over again? I was wondering, what answer did you give yourself back then before you started with your own endeavors?
Yeah, you know, there was one thing when we were going through the cigar book, I would run into Nestor Plasencia, right? And I remember my father used to always tell me, hey, you know, Nestor, he's always working hard. He's a workaholic. And I would find out what their production was. And then, you know, Nestor always gives you a different production number. So you never even knew. Nestor, one week he was 150. You asked him 3 days later, he's 280,000 cigars a day. So you never knew. And these numbers would drive me crazy. So at that point, all I wanted to do was to be the biggest. And then I went and visited. I had 2 mentors at a time. I had Estelo Padron, who was Orlando's brother, but I don't think they had a close relationship. He used to run the Hoyo Monterrey and Punch Factory for Villazon in Honduras, and Rolando Reyes. Hopefully you guys know who Rolando Reyes is, but these 2 guys were the single best manufacturers ever in the history of cigar making. They were the best. And Estelo Padron had the cleanest operation you've ever seen. That really bothered me, and I wanted to make our operation much better, much cleaner. And so at that time, I just want to be bigger and bigger and grow and be the biggest and cleanest operation. And if Rocky did something, I would have to do it. And if Jose Oliva did something, I had to do it. Once I got out of we'll call that the rat race. Once I get out of it with this new operation, I realized that everything I wanted, I had done. I hit 100,000 cigars a day. We were selling 17, 18 million cigars. I did all of that already. What I wanted to do with this other company was really focus on branding. I didn't want to focus on volume. I wanted to focus on the brand and on the human factor and become a lot more of a philanthropic operation, not driven by money anymore. So now I'm really driven by projects that I want to do to help people, you know, reforestation programs and different concepts that I want to work out. Of course, now with COVID, everything's changed and I have to redo those plans again, because we don't know where exactly we're going to need the help just yet.
So was it really like a step in personal and professional maturation that you went through in order to being able to start your own thing then?
Yeah, 100%. You know, when I started the first company, I was 22, 23 years old. I was a young kid. Everybody wanted to give me advice and everybody was very friendly. And I think that's from growing up fast at a young age. I think that's the one thing I learned best, which is take advice. When someone gives you advice, just take it. It's really important. But then, you know, when I came in with the second operation, then I realized, look, I'm 40 years old in the second one. Of course, still young, but no, I'm no longer the youngest one out there anymore. You know, now the approach and the way people see me is different. Just from the humor and the jokes that you do and the type of strategy, everything has to be completely different. I can't get away with a lot of things that I used to get away with before. And people are expecting different from us now. Plus, everybody knew about the transaction with Davidoff. Everybody was expecting something different. And a lot of guys were expecting me to make the same cigars as Camacho, which was probably one of the biggest challenges for us. And I just wanted to do everything, move as far away as possible as I could from Camacho, because I wanted to challenge myself and do something different. I didn't want to cheat in any way.
Would you also see like an evolution in the brands now? Because you mentioned that you even after moving from Camacho to your own brands, that within the last couple of years now, did you see a tremendous evolution there as well, where you feel like you got to be more mature, you got to be a bit more serious, and probably feel like you can't do all the more disruptive things anymore? Do you feel like that changed the company profile over the last couple of years?
Yeah, you know what this company allowed me to do, and I think about this a lot. Usually when I sit down with Tom Lazuka, we start telling stories. It allowed me to be a lot more schizophrenic, man. It really allowed me to have different personalities. And I realized that you could have the different personalities. You know, for example, we have the Asylum cigar. And that was Tom Lazuka's idea to make that thing 70 by 7, which is the stupidest thing I've ever thought of, or I've ever heard, rather. I didn't think of it. And it worked. I said, okay. So if I feel like Jack Daniels and getting into a bar fight, Asylum is the brand for me. If I want to feel more mature, more elegant, more calm, you know, more like a grown-up, is the Eiroa First 20. And there's something in between always. So it does allow me to explore different personalities. In the way I blend cigars, I'm a lot more patient, a lot more mature. You know, Camacho, our sales were so fast that we were, you know, we made a lot of mistakes rushing tobacco sometimes. And I wouldn't ferment tobacco as long as, you know, now I ferment tobacco 4 and 5 years before it goes in a cigar. Back then in the Camacho days, man, dude, sometimes it was 6-7 months inside in fermentation. It wouldn't even make it to a bale. It would go straight from the pilon into production, because sometimes, you know, our back orders would be sometimes over $1 million. And when you're 24, 25, it's really hard to say no to $1 million. And but you know, now maturity did in fact help with that. However, I am noticing that I'm going back to blending strong cigars again. So the 22 and 23-year-old guy inside me is still very much alive and well, and still very interested in making stronger cigars. That's what I was lighting up now, which is an Eiroa Dark. I like the full body cigars, and the launches we had this year were going to be strong cigars also. The CLE, I think we're going to call it the Graduate, and the Asylum 8.
So would you say there is like a little evolution in your palette? Because that's also something that we discussed with a lot of manufacturers and brand owners that were joining us before, where they sort of describe, well, at the beginning you might start a bit lighter or more medium to light bodied, and then you move into the really strong cigars. But at a certain point, you sort of cut it back a little bit, and you're more looking for the refined, for the more elegant and still complex aromas and flavors, but not necessarily the strength and the impact of the nicotine.
Yeah, you know, we're always fighting that. However, one thing that has happened, and which is different than 20 or 30 years ago, what happened in this evolution were the hybrid seeds. You had Corojo 98, Corojo 98, Corojo 99, Corojo 2006. And what happens with these tobaccos is that, I mean, we've forgotten about all the traditional seeds. For example, Dominican Republic won't grow Piloto Cubano anymore, and they won't grow. Very few people do, and you begin to homogenize the flavors. So the complexity in a lot of the blends has been slowly being. Do you understand what I'm saying? Homogenized. So many people are using the exact same seeds. And that's one thing that really keeps us very separated from what we're doing. And listen, I get it. I still use the Corojo 98. We grow that stuff too. I mean, that tobacco is fantastic. They have Anna 2000. We grow a lot of those because you do need them for your blend. But for something, if we want something really complex and something to have fun with, like the original Corojo seeds, you know, we do a lot with the with the Eiroa brand. That's when I really have fun with what you're talking about, the real complex blends. And when I go down there, you know, sometimes I'll have an idea, or I'll have a dream, or I have a thought, and I go down and fermentate. I go down to Honduras. When I'm sitting there in the fermentation rooms, I start getting these smells, and I start getting the visuals of the colors of the tobacco. And that's really where I start developing, the flavor. It pretty much the same way, like when you guys are going to cook a steak on the grill, you have an idea of what you want, you have the right ingredients, but you're going to try something a little different every time, maybe, because you want to see how it works. And that's pretty much the same way. And that's how the tastes do develop. And there are things I've tried again, and we get bored. We're fans of our own product. It's not always just about business, especially the family-owned operations. We think differently, I think.
I couldn't agree more. We had a great question from Joe that actually goes into the very same direction what you were just describing. So Joe, please bring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just wondering basically how you go about making, for creating a brand image or making a new blend. What's your sort of process in regards to that?
It all starts with the smell. And that's why the question was interesting, because the smells take me everywhere. If I get a certain smell from a tobacco and it's not prescribed, we don't sit there and we don't sample products from the marketplace. And I don't go out and say, oh my God, look, whatever, General Cigar or Macanudo's selling this one really well. Maybe I should do one just like it. No, we do. I don't even know. I don't even know what the other guys are making. And I rarely even smoke anybody else's cigars. Right. And I'll explain that in a minute. So there's something about the smell. It starts taking me someplace. And just from the smell, I start thinking, okay, do I want the cigar round? Do I want it box press? Do I want the box to be a black box, a wood color box? So I really don't have an explanation for you per se, because there's some cigars, when we did the Eiroa First 20, that is, I'll give you that example. That is some tobacco my father grew with the seed from my grandfather's farm from La Victoria. So he had the seed. He grew it in Honduras, and there was nothing special about the seed, just beside the fact no one's grown it for 50 years. And my father got that tobacco. And he said, Christian, the tobacco's too strong for me. Do you want them? I go, yeah, sure. I'll take the tobacco. Not the cigars, but the tobacco itself. I added 1 or 2 more leaves, and I changed the blend. I wanted something medium body. And from the first instance that I smelled that tobacco, I just knew I wanted that cigar to be box pressed. Then I went to the guys over at TSO. I knew I wanted the band to look like that. I wanted some holographic effect from the band. I knew the inside lid and the cover. I knew that I wanted the box to be flat. The reason we make the boxes flat like that is because, cigars marry each other. They like the smell of each other. So we make the boxes flat so you guys can put them inside your humidors and keep the cigars all intact inside the box. And, that's why we make those boxes 10 over 10. I know it's, for stores it's some problem because you can't fit that many.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's just the smells take me in the whole direction, man. And there's something I have in my mind. And sometimes we'll get a blend in 2 hours. Other times it'll take me 10 months. And those really suck, man. The long ones really, really piss me off.
I can imagine. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
I also read the statement of yours where you said, with Asylum in particular, it was a matter of a couple hours to set that one up.
Bro, that was the most frustrating. Look at, that's how can I say it, man? That's probably the most one of the more painful victories in my career, because that CLE, I spent months working on that blend and thinking about the band and thinking about this and that. And we finished the project and we had some free time. I said, dude, let me go. I know about this factory in Nicaragua. Let's go see what they're doing. And they had just lost, Naxa had just lost a customer. And I said, listen, Christian, man, you want to come in here, man? It's carte blanche, whatever you want to do. And, we had this kid working with us. He's an older guy, Kevin Baxter. So he blended a couple things, and then, we tried. And, the blend that we all agreed on was blend 13. That's where the name 13 came from. So we came out with that, but it was 2 hours. And we had the blend. It was, okay, sealed, done. Let's move with it. Because we didn't have the time. I think we probably just stayed overnight in Nicaragua that one time. Just so you guys know, I'm from Honduras, man. So we got this competitive thing with Nicaragua. It's been forever. And, Ricardo can attest to it. It's always been this, this thing. And again, like I said, I'm a super competitive guy. So for me, it was so painful to go do business in Nicaragua. But we did it. I'm very happy, man. And what pissed me off the most was, the people in Nicaragua are always happy. Those factories are huge. It's a tremendous amount of tobacco culture in Nicaragua. So it's always very, I'm telling you, man. Plus, the roads are so good. I just cross the border and I get pissed off because the highway from, Honduran highway is so bad. You cross the border, everything's perfectly paved. That shit just drives me crazy. But anyway, yeah, Asylum didn't take very long for us to get that cigar done.
Now, when you talk about that frustration with the competitive edge, like between Nicaragua and Honduras, do you still feel like you're a little bit like the underdog, where you sort of feel underappreciated and undervalued, and it gives you that little extra of competitiveness?
No, not at all. No, I'll tell you what happened. Honduras was always a very key element in many blends because the tobacco was always strong. Lou Rothman was a real famous guy here in the U.S. He had a company called JR Cigars, and he had a quote saying that when cigar smokers grow up, they smoke Honduran cigars, because Honduran tobacco was always stronger, right, and always had a lot of body to it. And we never really had, though, that many strong brands out of here. And what happened was when Nicaragua had that, I call it the Nicaraguan cigar boom, really started in 2008, 2009, because Honduras got, number one, extremely unsafe. We had, I think, 100 kidnappings a month, a lot of criminality here. We had the narcos moved in. And then our salaries are almost twice as much as they are in Nicaragua. And there's no, the laws don't really protect the foreign investor here. It's really hard to do business in Honduras. I'm friendly with the Honduran president, Orlando. He asked me, why are people leaving Nicaragua? Because all those manufacturers were in Honduras before. I go, listen, man, because you guys are paying the ass to deal with. You guys are the most expensive. Honduras will come out in June and say, okay, guys, inflation last year was 27%, so we need to increase salaries 27% retroactively to January. All of a sudden now, if I'm making up the numbers, right? But if your payroll is 100,000, all of a sudden now your payroll just went up to 127,000. And then you have to go back retroactively. So it just cost you an extra, whatever, $150,000 extra that you weren't even budgeted for. And so it really was very hard for us to do business in Honduras. And it remains. But listen, I'm from Honduras. I'm still there. It is a lot more expensive than Nicaragua. So no, I don't feel that competitive. Not that way. Just in general for the country. Because I also go to CLE. And dude, man, they got hotels. They got everything super well developed. And, Honduras will get there one day. We're going to beat these Nicaraguans. But we're just not beating them right now. But we will.
And let's be honest, the whole evolution of CLE was because of the premium cigar industry, right?
I want to say yes, but no, man. Dude, these people have, we had one of our partners before was Carlos Pelas in Camacho Cigars. Carlos Pelas is this great industrialist in Nicaragua. He had banks, he had everything. You know how now you can deposit your checks just with a picture from your phone? He had that back in probably, I want to say, year 2000 in Nicaragua already. So Nicaragua was always the fastest in taking up technology, rent-a-cars, cell phones. They had cell phones there probably 9 years before we had them in Honduras at development, or maybe 5 years, right? And internet 3 or 4 years before Honduras. So it was not just cigars in general, but Nicaragua set the business or the platform for business a lot. If I want to get a manufacturing, when we import products into our countries, we get these like a free trade zone, right? In Honduras, it takes 24 months. In Nicaragua, it takes 48 hours. Not even. You get the application done. You get this piece of a sheet of paper that you're approved. It's not a rubber stamp. It's not the official paper. And then whatever, 2 months later, you get the official paper. So business is just a lot easier. Just one thing that's weird in Nicaragua, Ricardo, I can't figure out. Why do people have to renew their corporations every 10 years? That I can't figure. A company can't live longer than 10 years. I can't figure that one out. But beside that, it's a lot friendlier to do business in Nicaragua than it is in Honduras.
Let's go back to the tobacco a little bit. And Brock from Stockholm had a great question on that.
Thank you. So I just was wondering about the wrappers. The Maduro is very popular, but I tasted some of the Oscuro, and I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on that wrapper? I just feel so sweet and powerful.
All right, so the Maduro means mature in Spanish. It used to be that the Habano seeds, especially, the the higher the leaf is on the tobacco plant, the thicker and the darker it's going to ferment. So Maduro used to be mature. It was a top plant, and these would ferment a lot darker. It was a dark brown. However, in the 1990s, when we had the cigar boom here, people began in the US, people began to identify Maduro with black or dark. So that just began to limit tobacco leaves and the varieties that you could use. The two most popular ones became US Connecticut broadleaf, whether it's grown in US or it's grown somewhere else, or the Mexican wrappers. You know, we opt for the Mexican wrappers, and they do give you that very sweet flavor. Now, there's something else you have to watch out for, because some companies like to flavor their not flavor, I'm sorry, to color. You know, they add some sort of coloring to their tobacco. It's not artificial. That you kind of bleed the tobacco stems, and you know they get that juice from the tobacco stems. You guys ever left like a cigar in a cup or in a toilet? You know, it bleeds a color. So overnight. So what they do is you leave the tobacco stems, and they'll bleed this dark color, and then you're able to apply it to the tobacco leaves. You know, we don't like doing that, but the wrappers and the broadleaf tends to be sweeter tobaccos and not necessarily that strong. So that's really the one thing that if you talk to like the old Cuban the old timers, the old Cuban guys, they can't figure out why a Maduro cigar is milder than a Cuban seed cigar. So that's pretty much the thing. And you know, and that becomes and Oscuro is pretty much the higher it is in the tobacco plant, the darker it's going to ferment. Usually the fourth priming and the fifth priming will give you that type of dark fermentation. Is that what you were asking me?
Yeah, I was just wondering if are you increasingly using the darker leaves in your cigars?
We are. You know, we have 2 or 3 blends right now using the Maduro, the Maduro tobacco. We're using the CBT, for example, the Eiroa CBT. That's Mexican seed grown in Honduras, and it does give us that dark flavor. That one gives you a lot of body, mostly because of the minerals in the soil in Honduras, and you know, the medulla oblongata, which I don't think we have it in Europe yet. And I'm trying to think right now, man. I'm going blank right now. The Eiroa First 20, that's also the same one we use for the CBT, but the blend is different inside. But that one's also grown in Honduras. It's Mexican seed grown in Honduras. So it depends what the market's asking us for. We do these projections, but I don't think the dark leaf, not for us in the US, that the dark leaf will do more than the regular Habano seed. Not for us here.
Fair enough. Last question. You know the Davidoff late hour. It's the leaves have been in this whiskey bottles or whiskey. And you know, I pay 10 more euros just for that story to be able to tell my friends that the leaves have been inside a whiskey jar. Have you thought about adding that kind of story to some of your cigars? Because I'll pay another €6.
That's an offshoot of something we started, because we did it, then Davidoff did it, Perdomo did it, and I think Camacho did it also. What we did it years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. We got together with a place called New Holland Brewery up in Michigan, and they make this thing called Dragon's Milk, right? It's so when we got the barrels, we went to, it was Tom Lazuka's idea. We took the barrels and we asked them to cut a door into the barrels, and we shipped the barrels down to Nicaragua. We would put, I don't know, probably 900 or 1,000 cigars in at a time for 72 hours, just to let them sit inside the barrel. And you would pull these out, and they're almost like a sponge. So you had to be very careful when you pull them out, because if you notice that the cigar, like if you saw a cigar coming straight out of that, you would never touch the cigar. The wrappers were all, they're all moist and holes. It looked exactly like a sponge. And then you let the cigar sit, and once that stuff evaporates, then the cigar will be normal again. And that cigar was called Dragon's Milk. We had it out for a while. And we did it because Tom wanted to do it with that brewery. I'm a naturalist. I don't like anything artificial on cigars at all. Okay, but we'll do it again. I mean, we've done it a couple more times on the different names. And they're fun to do. But I'm not a big flavor or additives into cigars kind of guy. I like them nice and pure, man. The purer, the better.
Fair enough.
My opinion.
Christian, would you say that this was probably like a trend or a fad that occurred in the premium cigar industry? And would you say in general that there are certain trends that you see coming and going, and that like in other industries, these trends are really up and down, and things come and go?
100%, man. Look, I knew. What was our mark? My father made his mark with a cigar called Baccarat back then. It was originally Carl Upman, and then it got turned into Baccarat. His thing was putting a sweet cap on the Connecticut wrappers. Then in the United States, the trend in the United States for many years through the 90s were first the 70s was the green wrappers, right? The Candelas. Then like 80s and 90s, the milder cigars became more popular, these Dominican type cigars with Connecticut wrappers. And then that's why we made such an impact with Camacho, because we started using that Corojo seed, which will give you a lot of body, the authentic Corojo. We don't use hybrids for any of those cigars. So it would give you a lot of body with a very sweet finish. And the market just wasn't ready for full body cigars. So it was a huge impact. We really made our mark. We did the same thing in Germany. We did this taste test in Germany with the Schusters back in 2000, which was a whole controversial thing we did. We got in trouble with Habanos and everything. Sued us, but I loved it. I was so happy to piss him off. Again, I was younger and I just wanted to start trouble with everybody. And then when we came out with this new company in 2012, I knew I had to make my mark somehow, and that's what we did, the 70x7, because there is a tremendous lack of innovation and creativity in our industry. A guy like Drew is such a great job, man. Jonathan was such a hard worker, and actually. I like the fact you talked to John. John Huber was the guy who really took packaging in our industry to a whole different level with CAO, baseball caps and packaging. But I mean, there isn't as much try all the time. We're pushing as much as we can. We did it with the 70x7s, with the 80x8s. But I was telling Tom just yesterday, that was already 7, 8 years.
Did we lose Christian?
I think we just lost Christian for a moment due to some connection problems.
That's probably because he's in Honduras, right?
Well, he's in the US. At least he said so.
Oh, I didn't know where he was.
Let's see. I'm pretty sure that we will get him back on as soon as possible.
Take a poll, Reinhard, and find out how many people are smoking CLE or one of Christian's cigars.
I actually wanted to ask you, plus, not just whether you're smoking one of Christian's cigars, but also what you're thinking about them. Feel free to unmute your mic and share some thoughts. Johan, what are you smoking?
I'm smoking the classic Eiroa, which is just amazing as always. I mean, it's a perfect cigar. It has that sweetness in the end, what you just mentioned before. Love it. For me, the perfect. It just shows how much passion he puts in his cigar and how perfect they are.
I saw a posting from Aldo a little while ago about a beautiful cigar that he had ready to smoke for tonight. Aldo, want to share some of your thoughts on that?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, everyone that knows me know that I love Christian Eiroa cigars. All of them, especially John, knows very well. But in this long night, I'm smoking the Asylum Goliath. It's an enormous cigar. Yes, it's a really big cigar, but full of creaminess, balancing, elegance. So since I want to be relaxed and stay a long time with you, I choose an enormous smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I really love all Eiroa cigar, especially the one that John is smoking now. So I totally agree with John.
How far into the cigar are you? Because that's really a mighty stick, isn't it?
I am more or less in the end of the first third.
Perfect. Wonderful. I just read in the comments that Christian is trying to get back in. Pretty sure he will be here in a second. What else are you enjoying? Share some thoughts and comments.
I've never smoked an Eiroa stick, much to my shame. I'd love to get my hands on some to try them out. But at the moment, I'm smoking Ramon Alon's Special Selected, and I'm thoroughly enjoying that.
Perfect. Wonderful.
I'm smoking the Asylum Lobotomy Toro, and Debbie's got a CLE Quarenta Robusto.
Hey guys, I think I'm back.
Wonderful. There you are.
You hear me?
Absolutely. Yeah, we hear you.
All right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
No worries. Welcome back.
Switch to my phone. Here.
So we were just sharing some thoughts and feedbacks from all the people here at the lounge and the cigars that we're enjoying. So
excellent.
Johan, let's pick up with the questions that we had, and you wanted to raise a question regarding fermentation.
Yeah. Christian, you mentioned it before, and I mean, you and me, we had some very interesting talks. You said before that you fermentate your cigars your tobacco up to 5 years, where I would say it's normal or common in the business to do it for 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years, and then store the tobacco for 3-4 years. But I think you go a different way in that, right?
No. I maybe I misspoke. No, well, the fermentation process is the normal process. Now you can do your fermentation more slowly, or you do it faster, higher temperatures, lower temperatures. But it's just done. You put in your bales. At that point, when we're stored 4 or 5 years. Okay. And what you're trying to do at that point, stronger tobacco and milder tobacco. So you're trying to do is make sure everything gets toned down. So cigars are always consistent when you roll them, and you tone down a lot of that strength. For example, the new stuff that we're doing, we're not gonna let the tobacco sit that long in bales after it's done. It'll probably be a couple months after it's been fermented in a bale, and I'll probably put it into a blend very quickly because I want the cigar to be strong. You know, there's always been that issue, and it never was something here in the U.S. There's always something in Europe, right? The Europeans would always talk about, oh yeah, I like to age my cigars, and I never really quite understood why. And then after a while, I understood, and I think maybe that there's a big difference in how we prepare tobacco here in our Caribbean countries versus how they do it in Cuba. You know, the way we age them, no need to sit on them. We've done all that work for you already. And I don't know if it was a way that it was being taught over there. I don't know exactly what the reasons were. I could assume that's what happened. That they just had different ideas on how to present the cigars to people. But the way we make them, the cigars are ready to go. Their best point and best time is the moment you get them. No need to age.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's actually a very interesting point, Christian, when you talk about the differences in consumer behavior, different palates and different tastes between the US and Europe, or maybe even Asia. What's your perception on how these markets work?
Well, listen, I have to say up front, before I get myself in trouble, I learned about making cigars from the Germans and the way the Germans approach things, right? The Germans can take the fun out of a fun house. So the Germans are a lot more technical. And listen, and I say it with a compliment. I'm not saying it negatively at all. And I remember one of the first trips, and we were just talking about this with Anne-Marie, I think a couple weeks ago, Anne-Marie Schuster. And, you know, one of my first trips to Germany, this guy just starts complaining about the cigars. And, you know, this and that. And, you know, I'm not entirely bothered, but I was thinking, you know, the guy could have been nicer. And then Philip Schutzer said, "Oh yeah, listen, he's trying to explain to you how to make it better." And I really understood it. You know, I don't know if Philip was just trying to make me feel better or not, but my impression was that their comments were really helping us make our cigars better. And because of the Germans, we went, the first thing they did when I returned, and we got those draw master machines. Every single one of our cigars, every single one, 100% goes through a draw test machine, and they have the same amount of PSI per draw.
And the significance of that is, you might think, well, cigar rollers, they roll them all day long. They should, yeah, okay. Number one, people are going to make mistakes. Number two, depending on the weather, back then we didn't have climate control factories. So back then, when the season was rainy, bunchers wouldn't feel. And when the weather was dry, they would use a lot. The smoking habits were different. I remember there was a store I went to, I won't mention the name, XYZ store in Switzerland. I remember they had a smoking lounge, not very popular, so maybe I'm giving away the store now. And this young guy walks in. The guy must have been 28, 29 years old. And there were a bunch of older guys there. When that young guy walked in, all the older guys just looked at him real strange. And the guy felt very uncomfortable, and he walked out. And it was really interesting to me that younger people, and maybe that was one of the reasons why younger people weren't smoking cigars. You go to Japan, the ceremony is completely different in Japan. Japanese, you do a cigar night, let's say it's from 7 to 10. You get in and you're used to just preparing the cigars, making sure the cigars are ready. And our dealer, which is actually an Austrian guy, he's with Japan Tobacco now, with JTI, Adrian Buehler. So he goes, no, Christian, you don't give the cigars to the Japanese first. First, you have to get them drunk. Japanese people need to relax because these guys are hardworking machines. They're more intense than the Germans. Now, back then, to me, that was a big word. More serious than the Germans. That was a real strong word for me. So, these guys, first you get them real happy, and then you give them the cigars. And just like that, man, they were all there on time. They left on time. Culturally, it was completely different then. But I have seen an evolution in the last 7-8 years. And I think especially with Caribbean cigars, because back then, you couldn't sell cigars. It wasn't very popular. And my personal theory, look, if you guys are in Europe, you guys would know more than I would. But my personal theory is that social media is really making it attractive for that same 28, 29-year-old guy. He doesn't want to go in and smoke what his father used to smoke. He doesn't want to buy Cohiba Monte Cristo. He wants to try hopefully Asylum, or hopefully Eiroa, or hopefully he wants to try something that is different and more represents his personality than what his father or maybe grandfather were spoken. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Christian. The connection is just a little iffy. But so we
sorry about that. Sometimes. Were you able to get most of what I said?
Not the last part. Pretty much everything before.
Okay, good.
Now that you put on your glasses, we can hear you better.
Listen, shut up.
Another question came in from Ricardo.
Hi, Mama.
Thank you very much, Reinhard, again for this incredible opportunity. Great to see so many familiar and not so familiar faces, and it is always a privilege to hear you, Christian, and see you. And first of all, thank you so much for your really positive comments about Nicaragua. I think you know my country and our industry better than most Nicaraguans that I know. And I think there's a very special relationship, between what we call ourselves Nicaraguans, pinoleros, and the Hondurans, the catrachos. I feel most at home outside of Nicaragua in Honduras. That's as close as it feels for me. If I'm not in Nicaragua, as close as it feels. And I think that's a very special relationship, almost like brothers. Whereas when I was growing up, we used to look at Honduras and say, wow, they're really doing things right. And then, as brothers go back and forth, sometimes one brother will take advantage and do some things better than others. And I think you're right in pointing out that we've done some things well, particularly in the past maybe 10, 12 years. And there's a lot of things, however, that we need to do a lot better, including the 10-year on corporation. So well point taken. So I'd love to I love your cigars, I have to say, and I was introduced to them by a good friend of ours, Scott Vines from Tour Imports, and becoming a real fan of them. And I remember, I mean, I think what showcases how close Honduras and Nicaragua are when we met was actually when we were celebrating in September, I think it was the 15th or the 16th, the national days of Honduras, Nicaragua. We invited Mexico on that occasion, just because we like Mexicans as well, quite a lot. And we love their wrappers, and the San Andres is incredible. And we were back then at the Ritz with the Diplomatic Cigar Club. Still regret not staying for dinner with you and your wife and my wife and everybody else that night. But it's really, really interesting to hear your story, particularly hearing your process into how you come with your amazing creations. And I was just sort of thinking, and would love to hear, have there been any collaborations with either producers or brands that either have been sort of in the heads, in the makings, in the dreams, or anything that potentially could become a collaboration between your brand? Or is that not something that really feels natural to you, to look at others and join efforts and create something that comes out of that symbiosis with someone else?
Yeah, thanks for asking, and thank you for the very nice words. Yeah, listen, we did a project years ago. I forget it's been so long, man. I sound like an old man, but maybe 2005, 2006, I did a project with Lito Gomez, and we called it the Face Off, after that movie. Remember John Travolta and Nick Cage? And we did a Face Off project. We only did it once. I did want to do it again, and we never really got a chance to do it all over again, because the markets change, everybody's situation changes, and our industry has changed so much, and it changes all the time. We're in constant flux, and I don't really think that we've had any time to just sit back, relax, and try something different or something fun. And I do agree. I would like to see a lot more with that. We've been talking with Jonathan from Jewish State about doing something for a couple of years now, but then his company sold, so his situation is different. With Ernesto Carrillo, we try to do something also, and we never just get the exact right time. And especially now with the FDA, we don't know how much we can do. So that's changed a lot, and we've been focused on FDA right now, really for the last 5 years now, 4 or 5 years, completely focused on the FDA. And so I do want to do more collaborations. I am doing the stuff with General Cigar now, that Wynwood Hills project out of there. They want to do something with us too. General Cigar will be Scandinavian tobacco. I know AJ Fernandez has done a few things with, I think, Monte Cristo. Correct me if I don't follow the other brands. I know they've done something with Altadis, and I know they've done something with General Cigar, Scandinavian. So you do see some projects, but as far as co-branding, not yet, or collaborations like you would see Supreme doing with Louis Vuitton, not yet, man. But we should do something like that again. And I am focused on trying to do it. We're just trying to see what the FDA wants from us first.
Thank you.
Ricardo, thank you so much for your question, and truly spoken like a diplomat. It's always a pleasure to have you on the sessions, and many thanks for your great comments and questions. Christian, there was another question coming through Facebook, and the gentleman was asking, what is your opinion on cigars or tobaccos from the Canarian Islands? Have you had any experience with these?
No, man. The only experience I have with Canary cigars have been the machine made, but no, I haven't had much experience with them for a long time. We haven't even, I don't think I ever even tried tobacco from Canary Islands. I think they're still growing some tobacco, but I think it was mostly machine made cigars coming out of there. So no, I don't have enough experience with them. And I'm sure it'd be a lot of fun to work with that tobacco. Look, I've worked tobacco from Italy, great tobacco from the Benevento area. We've done tobacco from Philippines, from Bangladesh, of course, Indonesia. So I wouldn't mind trying something from Canary Islands. But no, I don't have any experience with it.
Talking about them, like the different origins and different tobaccos, is there a specific type that you have a sweet spot for?
Yeah, listen, of course, Corojo from our farm is my favorite. But there's another one I used to love. It was called Cubita from Colombia, and it used to come from an area called Tayrona. And I think that seed also disappeared because they moved over to that freaking Corojo 98 seed. Look, I hate the Corojo 98 seed, not because of what it does, but because of what it has done to the industry. and we've completely eliminated all the other tobacco seeds from existence. The only guy really experimenting with any different kind of seed is David Perez. You know, there used to be this one guy named Dr. Bertunison, and he had these bunch of seeds he used to produce. And David Perez from ASP, you know, they do most of the wrappers, Connecticut wrappers for the entire industry, really, machine made also. So he's been doing a lot of experimentation with that. But yeah, man, I hate that Grow 98 because it just became so easy to grow, and it's such great tobacco. But we lost all sort of variety from our blends.
Now we obviously have to talk about the Corojo a little bit more, because that feels like your signature and the one thing that people also really associate with Eiroa. And there was a question from Adish over on Facebook. What are the differences, if any, between your Corojo and the Corojo grown in Nicaragua? And I think this is a perfect entry sort of question into you giving us a little more detail about the Corojo and your personal story with it.
Yeah, thank you. The guy who developed Corojo was the guy named Diego Rodriguez in Cuba. And what he would do is he had his farm, and the farm was called Santa Inés del Corojo. And what he would do, he would take the pick of the crop every year and regrow it. So the Cuban guys would drive by and say, "Hey, I want some of the tobacco from El Corojo." That's where the name came from. Now, Diego Rodriguez took that seed and he grew it in Nicaragua. His grandson, Daniel Rodriguez left Cuba in 1979. You know, he didn't like some of the partners that were there, and anyway, he never wanted to do business with government. So either he was doing business with Somoza, or when Somoza was no longer there after 79, he was going to have to do business with a new government. So he just said, you know what, I made enough money, I'm retiring. And he left. He just moved. He had investments in La Joya, Nicaragua, which Simon Camacho had also started that factory with Francisco Bermejo back then. So eventually he gave my dad those seeds, probably in the mid-90s. And my father started growing those seeds in Honduras in 1997. Now, a few things happened that were interesting. In 1987, from all accounts, we don't know for a fact, but from what we understand, Cuba stopped growing the authentic Corojo seed. And Cuba started focusing with Ceuta, which was the French monopoly, and Tabacalera Española, which was the Spanish monopoly, which of course then they ended up getting together called Ceuta. But back then they were doing, Altres. But then, you know, they started working on these different hybrid seeds. That's what developed Havana 2000, all these different hybrids. So all of a sudden we start making a cigar, and General Cigar comes out with Punch Rare Corojo, man, and I lose my mind because, oh my God, someone's again. I'm young. Listen, I'm so upset because they copied the brand. So I go, you know, and I had tried months before to register the trademark because Daniel Rodriguez said, "Listen, Christian, you guys can keep the trademark. I'm never going to use it." But in 1996, the United States Patent and Trademark Office deemed that a region from Cuba. Just like you can't trademark the name, you know, Germany or Miami, that can't be a trademark. So we couldn't protect that trademark. All of a sudden, everybody starts using the word Corojo, and then eventually, one of the hybrids that they develop is the Corojo 99, and then the Corojo 2006. From what I understand, I'm not a botanist. I don't sit there. I wasn't sitting in the lab. There is no relation between one leaf, one seed, or the other. You know, the Corojo leaf, even just when you look at the authentic Corojo leaf, might grow just a little over 2 meters. The yield per 1 acre might be just 800 kilos. Whereas these other ones, you know, you take a Corojo 98 or a Corojo 99 or Corojo 2006, these things will grow, you know, they might grow 2.5 meters, maybe even grow higher than that. And, you know, these will yield for 1 acre, might give you 1,400 kilos and higher yield and wrapper. They really are fantastic seeds. But they just went ahead and they started using the name. And because we couldn't protect it, there was no way to protect it. And, you know, plus you can't build a business and start and fight with everybody. I wasn't going to sit here and sue everybody because they were using that name, because I would have spent all my money on lawyers at the time. But yeah, we couldn't protect the trademark. So no, from what I know, and unless I'm proven otherwise, we really are the only ones using the authentic seed. And the hybrids don't really have anything. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying it's to my taste. I like the authentic Corojo seed because it gives you that very full body taste and that very sweet finish. And the first hybrid experiments out of Cuba that everybody was getting very quickly. I mean, that those seeds were spread out very quickly. People would bring them out in pouches and coffee cans and the pockets of their pants, whatever they could. And I remember the first ones we tried, they just would taste. There was this little aftertaste back here. And I know they've evolved a lot since, but the original ones taste like that. And that was, how it is when you have a first impression with something. It's tough to get out of that first impression. But just to be clear, we do use a lot of hybrids now, or a couple hybrids, not a lot. But no, as far as the authentic Corojo, we like the authentic stuff only. I don't think, my opinion is that, from what I know, that there's no relation between this one and the Corona 89, the 2006.
Do you feel like there's an opportunity to sort of expand the original seed varietals and work with them a bit more, or to make them more popular yet again? Or is it really just a matter of the yield and the economical considerations that come to play here?
Yeah, one big issue that we have in our industry is there's a tremendous lack of innovation. So if you start developing something, all of a sudden everybody starts doing the exact same thing. So to sit here and try to make a seed more popular would only cause other people to try to do what you're doing or copy what you're doing, and it won't really generate. It won't be 2 + 2 is not going to equal 4. It's going to equal 3. It's just going to hurt what you're doing even more. So what we've done is we really just, and that's the other thing. If I want to do things, how do I do it differently this time? Just not focus on what everybody else is doing. We just focus on what we're doing ourselves. We try to, of course, to increase the efficiencies of the farm. We are certified by Bayer. We have 0 impact on the environment. We use the irrigation drip system. We've had it for 24 years already, and which we probably use 1/300th of the water we used to use before. And which doesn't really make us more efficient, but it does make us a lot friendlier to the environment. And at the end of the day, like I said before, it can't be, a business cannot only be about money. There has to be a tremendous amount of responsibility with the environment that you're working in, with the people you're working with, and the country that you're working in also. You have to be responsible citizens. And I think we've learned a lot as business people in our generation that we have to contribute somehow. So I'm working on a new farm that I'm trying to build now for myself, but this is, I'm going completely crazy with this one. I've had plenty of time to think now since this stupid social distancing. So I'm actually trying to develop a farm that will be completely solar, or the water pumps will be solar, everything. I'm watching all these African videos and how they grow the stuff in Africa and different countries. But yeah, trying to move to a more solar and completely off the grid system. And in the meantime, working on a reforestation program in Honduras as well, trying to regrow. Originally we wanted to do pine trees and cedar, but now we're going to grow a lot of fruit trees, which we know that the local people will not cut down, and we also provide a food source for the local villagers. I don't mind if they take all the fruit. We're doing it on purpose, but we're trying to see how much. I would love to reforest probably 1,300 hectares in my lifetime. I got about 40 years left, so see how much we can do.
A couple of questions regarding tobacco coming in from the gentleman here. Laurent, you had one, please.
Yeah. Okay. So just I would like to know about your tobacco, your wrapper, Corojo. How many cigars or how many wrapper you can do with 1 kilo of tobacco, approximately?
Salut Laurent, c'est difficile, hein? No, we actually measure it pretty well. The way we measure it is, let me do a quick conversion here. We measure the yield per 1,000 cigars. So you can probably get out of 2 kilos of wrapper, you get 1,000 cigars. Probably maybe 3 kilos. When you compare it to the Connecticut's, maybe 2 kilos will give you 1,000 cigars on wrapper. Broadleaf, you need about broadleaf is probably about 5.5 or 6 kilos, just like that Mexican, 5.5 or 6 kilos. So sometimes it's not the weight of the leaf itself, but the yield. Now there are these new samples that we got that I'm working on for a new project that I want to do for 2021, which out of one tobacco leaf, I was able to get 6 wrappers, which was amazing, man. And for big cigars too. So, we're trying to figure out, and that's what got interrupted with this whole coronavirus. That's the project I was working on now. So, yeah, but yield is everything, man. That's really a very good question. And just so you know, for a cigar, we're talking about 50 by 5 Robustos, right? So it usually takes about 55 pounds, 25 kilos of tobacco to make 1,000 cigars. That's wrapper, binder, filler. So it's about 16 kilos for 1,000 of filler, and the wrapper and binder are about the same.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Christian, one question from Valerie Bradshaw over on Facebook, because you mentioned the drip system. Do you have any problems with things like nematodes or other pesky little critters?
We do. What makes tobacco so interesting, so we'll take a comparison between Honduras and the Connecticut Valley. We don't have any frost at the end of the year. Whereas Connecticut, they have frost at the end of the year, kills just about everything. And all of a sudden, the whatever pests have to be reborn again. And they will. In Honduras, all the pests, whatever pests we get, they actually begin to, even blue mold, which is the one thing, that's the main reason why all these hybrid tobaccos were developed. Even blue mold begins to develop some sort of an immune system to it. It really is incredible how all biological creatures and all they tend to develop these defense systems. So we constantly have to keep changing. That's why we work with Bayer. And Bayer, they were able to certify our farm for the better growing practices. They actually went to our factory, and we use their better manufacturing practices for hygiene and all this. But they wouldn't certify. They didn't want to certify the factory because, like, listen, come on, man, we're a human health company. We can't sit here and certify a tobacco product. It's just not going to happen. But the farm they were able to certify, which is kind of, with what's happening now. I don't know what my reaction is. I really don't know. I know Honduras hasn't reopened yet, and but we're taking our time, and we are completely retrofitting. We've always had like this special a mist system they have to walk through. It's a tunnel you walk through to disinfect, and when you walk to any of our rooms, we have a special sponge with disinfectant, antibacterial, all these kinds of products, and antivirus products. And now we're redoing the factory where we always had a clinic, and we've had a nurse. Now we made the clinic bigger. We measure everybody's temperature. But every surface that anybody will come into contact with, we have a cleansing station right next to it, so people could disinfect. Because this is something, we have these people working in conditions where they have to be close to each other. We'll be able to separate them, but they are going to run into each other, or they are going to use some of the same equipment. So we're trying to make it as safe as possible. It's really unfair for us to expose any of our workers to something that we ourselves would not be exposed to. So we're taking the time, and it's thanks to Bayer that we've been able to do that, man. They've been very, very helpful with this. So I'm sorry. I know I went on a tangent. I forget things, so I want to make sure I said it.
No worries. Great comment. Ray had a question. Glad you're joining us from Leeds.
Hi, thanks, Reinhard and Sabine, for that great evening again, and good to see many people around. Christian, from that conversation, I think what I understand is you seems to like the sweet tobaccos. So what do you think about the Peo de Oro and his hybrid Sancti Spiritus? Do you have any do you have any experience with it, or do you know it?
We do. We actually, in the first CLE blends, when we first launched the cigar, we were using Pelo de Oro from Peru. And I actually liked it. I wasn't getting a tremendous amount of sweetness from that tobacco. And we do have, listen, it's not a reference. With Camacho, when Camacho Simon Camacho sold the company to us, we found 5 bales of Pelo de Oro from Escambray, but this is probably 1963. So, and that didn't like anything. It just tastes like cardboard. We did use it in a couple blends. We had to bring it back to life. But no, as far as the Pelo de Oro itself, it's good tobacco. we stopped using it mainly because the Peruvians became very inconsistent in growing it. So we were buying those from ASP, David Perez, the same guy that does the Connecticut wrappers, and the flow was not going to be consistent anymore. So we just took it out of our blends because you have to make cigars need to be consistently good or consistently bad, but they have to be consistent. That's the one rule. So if I wasn't going to be able to get the tobacco anymore, we slowly began to phase it out of the CLE blends. So I wish I could have a more detailed answer for you, but I did like it when we used it. When we still have a few more, if you want, I can make you some cigars in Peleoro from Peru, but you have to buy them all.
Thanks for that. And did you try the Pelo de Oro hybrid with the Criollo, the Sancti Spiritus?
No, sir, I have not. Where are they growing that one?
I think there's small farms in. No, I think they grow it in Nicaragua, as far as I know, and I think small farms in Honduras, but I'm not sure which farm. I'm not that familiar with those.
No, not familiar with it, man. You know, there was one thing. That's another thing. You asked me a question. What would you do if I could do it all over again? I think that back in Camacho, I don't have the exact number, but if I tell you that I was using 70 different types of tobacco, I'm probably not exaggerating. And the one thing I sat down with Luis Aguilar, our factory manager this time, I said, listen, bro, no more than 7 or 8 different varieties. I don't need to be the foremost expert on all different types of tobaccos. We're not making private labels for anybody. We're gonna make cigars just for ourselves. We're gonna focus on these blends. Looking at people that do it better than we do. You know, Carlos Fuente, one of my mentors. Carlos only worked with I don't think Carlos Fuente uses more than 10 different varieties. You know, you could use another great company, Padron. I don't think Padron uses more than 6 or 7 different varieties. So I didn't want to fart around or try to experiment with any tobaccos. And it's tempting because, man, you get these beautiful offers and there's so much good tobacco out there, man. But you just got to control yourself and stick to what you know. And if our customers are liking what we're doing, then we stay right there. You know, there's no sense to go out and venture it or go crazy.
Thanks.
Dion from Illusion brought up a great point when he was on the show that he's like every manufacturer, he's always trying to sort of build his knowledge and his experience with different types of tobaccos, smoking them all, getting a feel for them. How do you make sure that you can sort of build that database in your head of all the different tobacco, especially when you work with 70 different ones?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that was a crazy thing, you know. And you know, that's when I said, you know, that's a good question, man. You know, earlier how I said that I don't smoke anybody else's cigars, and it's mainly that because we'll sit here, and you can only smoke X amount of cigars a day, right? 2 cigars, 3 cigars, depending on what. And you know, when I go down to the factory, I'll probably I'll light probably about 20 cigars a day. But you're only smoking maybe a couple centimeters. You're not smoking the whole thing. And what you do is you get the tobacco that you got, you take 100% of that leaf, and you make a cigar out of it. Doesn't matter if it's filler wrap. It's not for looks. You just taste and see what tobacco is like, and you begin to form an idea in your head of what exactly they're going to taste like when you blend them together, and then you begin to blend them together. But see, that's kind of. And then once you get to know tobacco really well, you begin to understand the variations of that tobacco. You know, was it a low priming? Is it a high priming? What lot was it grown under? And you begin to, what's the word? You begin to maybe forecast, or you can guesstimate, make an educated guess as to what the tobacco is going to do and what's it going to do to the blend. I remember in Camacho, man, the cigars would be fantastic. All of a sudden, 1 week's production would go completely down. And that's because maybe we switched into a new tobacco, or that we had the supplier that we bought that tobacco from, not that cheated us, but you know, maybe they didn't have the right quality control, and we were using bad tobacco at the time, or tobacco that wasn't consistent with the blends. And that's what we wanted to limit our exposure and just focus on exactly what we wanted to do, and work with the tobaccos that we know. Yeah, man, it's crazy to build that kind of database. You can't.
Speaking of crazy, like we all know your love for implementing crazy ideas and for experimenting and bringing that spontaneity to the cigar industry. And before you mentioned that lack of innovation within the industry, where do you see room for improvement, and where do you think that innovation could really bring like a different element to the table?
But you know, it's funny because right now, as an industry, how can I say it, man? Our industry is going through a marketing era, not so much a production era. Because I think we can sit here and, I mean, you could argue either, somebody could argue the opposite, but I can pretty much tell you that there isn't one single bad cigar out there right now. They're all well made. The tobacco's all fantastic. Everybody's kind of even. I think the challenges right now are going to be in not so much the marketing of cigars, but the delivery of cigars. How is our industry going to change after COVID-19? Right? You know, how is it? Okay, the United States, we have internet selling, which is horrible for the brick and mortar stores, but cigars are selling. Yeah, but what happens in Spain? What happens in France that you have to buy at the estancos or Les Civet? You know, when you physically have to go and buy the buy the cigars there. So I think a big part of the innovation now, I don't think you're going to see much is by way of product. I think you're going to see by way of delivery. I have a real good friend, Dave from Two Guys Smoke Shop. You know, he can only do a curbside, but this guy's a nut job. You know, Dave likes doing dumb things and crazy things. So we had our guy went to Walmart yesterday and he bought one of these cheap tents. So we're doing a curbside humidor, smoking lounge, which is really just these cheap Walmart chairs. The chairs cost like $5. A tent maybe costs $20. He's going to sit there with a cooler and maybe even a little barbecue outside in the parking lot and trying to see if we get creative that way. But just to have fun, and because there is a tremendous need for somebody that likes smoking cigars at, I don't know, 5 o'clock every day to get out and smoke a cigar. They just want to leave the house. Maybe the wife is driving them nuts or the husband, you know? So we're trying, the delivery is the main thing. And as far as innovation of product, you're not going to see very much right now because we have to deal with the same with the FDA. Some people are messing around with CBD and cigars with CBD or even THC. You know, I'm not crazy about that idea. I don't indulge in the product. And I do think that the FDA is not going to like that one bit either. I think that's going to give us an unwarranted. But, you know, right now it's just square one, man, delivery. How are we going to deliver these cigars and how our store is going to be able to change? You know, a store now is going to have a cleaning station as you walk in. A store now will probably not allow customers to touch the cigars. You're going to have extra staff or make people wait outside while you tend on one customer at a time, see what he or she wants. You know, where before, and, you know, a lot of stores in Europe or stores in general are very similar now, right? That you have these walk-in humidors and a guy walks in, he'll pick 3, 4, 5 different cigars that he or she wants to smoke freely. No one's there bothering them. There's a fairly large amount of trust. But if a person touches a cigar, feels a cigar, and he puts it back in the box, people are not going to feel comfortable with that anymore. So now the delivery and the way the cigars are being sold is going to change. And that's a big part of what we're going to have to face now in the next, at least for the next year or something, until we get this vaccine.
Great point. And Philip Schuster just commented over on Facebook with 500 years of history within the cigar industry and the cigar business. What shall be really new and surprising, with a big question mark at the end? Like, do you still feel like you have a little disruptive idea or a project that you would really love to bring to
Oh, dude, listen, I have like 2 or 3. For example, I got a real dumb idea. I just put it out there so in case anybody else copies it, you'll know. One time, is Philip Schuster watching right now? I guess
he's over on Facebook, yeah. So I'm pretty sure he's watching.
I love that old guy, man. He used to scare me, man, but I love him. I learned a lot from the old man, from Schuster. Listen, so imagine you're smoking one cigar, and it tastes really, really good. And I assume most everybody here knows how to blow the smoke out the nose. And imagine you're smoking a second cigar, and that cigar at the same time, and that cigar also tastes real good. I was trying to work on some sort of, I mean, listen, it didn't get past me drawing on a piece of paper, a sort of a pipe that you can smoke 2 at the same time and get, it's almost like, I mean, something as simple as rum and Coke. You like to taste the rum, you're able to mix it with Coke, and then you have rum and Coke. So, I mean, that's just one silly idea. You know, there are a million things you can still come up with, man. Once you go down to that factory, you get all these different ideas of how to make cigars. I mean, sizes are another thing. You know, how do you make more interesting sizes? And the big sizes were a big disruption in the industry, and I didn't quite understand why. And the only two theories I can think of are the price. When we first came out, it was $7 for a 70x7, which was a tremendous amount of value for almost 3 hours. And the other reason is when Instagram and Facebook were becoming popular, and people wanted to be outrageous with their pictures, and all of a sudden they would take that big cigar. But then, there was a rule. Procter & Gamble has a rule. Procter & Gamble, when they hand out soap to people, they don't give out soap to people in small bags. They do soap in big bags, so people get used to it. So you give somebody something for 2 or 3 hours to enjoy, they like it. So, there are ways of being creative and getting our customers to be attracted to our products. And it's not always marketing, man. I don't believe in the whole marketing thing. I like, fair product, fair price, and just make it interesting enough and curious. We did, there's one, and with Johan, I made a bet with Johan, and he owes me. He still owes me $1. And I said, dude, let's bring in the Medulla Oblongata box pressed and round. It was a big fight at Durham Fair. No, 999. It's not. I go, dude, try it. And it actually worked. We took the exact same cigar, round and box press, all in the same box. And customers like to experiment with the cigars, one or the other. And for you guys in Europe, box press is still fairly new also. That's not something that's been very common. So there's still a bunch of things that we can do, man. And we'll keep developing.
Good to hear. A couple of questions from Dean. Dean, do you want to bring them up yourself?
Yeah, I can do it. Hey, Christian. Go back. Do you keep a database of like the year, the type of weather, the area where the tobacco plants are grown, and the species, to build up a like a flavor database?
Listen, we keep the database. Not only keep the database in the soil, but the minerals, the weather, the moisture level. We got this lady that works with us. Her name is Sandra. Oh my God, she's a complete nut job. Now we have all the database. We have nicotine content of tobacco. We have when it was planted, how much the rain was, because we have these probes on the ground. We have our own weather stations at the farm. What I don't have yet, which is actually helping us now, by the way, with the whole FDA, once they start if FDA gets their claws in us and they start going as far as the traceability of the product, we're pretty much ahead. What we haven't figured out a way yet is how to turn that data into workable data. The data exists. It's just a matter, and I'm moving in that direction now. I mean, that's not my first priority right now. First priority, we just got this one engineer. We're redoing our box factory and the way we produce our boxes and try to make it a lot more efficient. But one of the next steps within the next 2 or 3 years is definitely putting all that information in writing and coming up with a formula, because I do think you're absolutely right, Dean. Right now, it's pretty much just by taste and smell and by recognizing, but we're going to have to quantify some way and put in some sort of a manual so we know exactly what we're doing in the future. When I'm no longer, my dad's no longer, and someone else is coming along, we're going to have to document all these things. It's another thing I learned from the Germans. Everything has to be in writing.
Yeah, I think they're building up a database like that for scotches and Irish whiskeys. That I saw some guys that did a small little documentary on it. It's quite good, but they keep for years and years, and they'll have the grains, just one specific grain, and they'll just distill that particular grain, and then they keep that in a library, and then they can go back years later and taste it and see what the flavor profile has done, just like how time affects flavor profile of tobacco. Tobacco that's 6 months old versus 7 years old tastes completely different sometimes from each other.
Yeah, you're right, man. It's pretty cool, man. Yeah, listen, we do have it. It's just one of the things that's up there, but it's not top of mind right now, man. We got but we are gonna get there. We're trying we're talking about marketing. We're trying to see our product mix also. Definitely now with what just happened now in our industry, we're going to develop our box factory a lot more. We want to see if we start making humidors out of Honduras now also. I did in the 90s, but everything got very expensive. But now we can become a lot more efficient. We start making humidors and try to help our country's going to need a lot of help to recover. Just like the U.S., just like every country. You know, and the less we can import, it's not an anti-China thing. It's a pro-Honduran thing. You know, if I can source myself locally, I will. And if we can make this factory in Nicaragua, we'll do it in Nicaragua also, because there are no box factories. I mean, there are 2 or 3, but not as many as you think that they would be.
Quick comment from Scott. Scott, it's a pleasure to have you joining us yet again. Hope you're well.
Yep, thank you. Good evening, sir. I hope Alex and the family are all well.
Yes, sir.
Good. Question for you. Environmentally friendly, you're very heavy on that area. Is that the reason why you're putting more paper on your cigars instead of cello? Because we're facing things like single-use plastic taxes in the future. So things like cello potentially will be a taxed item because it's only used to protect and then thrown away. So is it just because you like it for marketing?
Can I please get a translator for the Scottish guy? I didn't. No.
See you, pal.
Anyway, no, listen, I can understand you. Tanya, I can't understand. Just wife. Like when she gets all excited, starts talking, I can't understand her one bit. No, listen, I hate cellophane. I've always hated cellophane. That was one of our battles always back in the 90s with Philip Schuster, because he, you know, the Camacho, I hated cellophane. No, the reason I did the tissue wrap was because cigars need to marry each other inside the box. And we also wanted to put the barcode in the back. And one big plus was, yes, I hate plastic too, Scott. You know, I'm not a crazy, you know, tree hugging type of guy, but anything that's wasteful is disastrous. And there's nothing I hate more than seeing plastic on the floor. People throw the stuff away everywhere. And trust me, if I didn't have to put the cellophane wrap outside the box, I wouldn't do that either. So we're eliminating plastic as much as possible. Matter of fact, we just try eliminating from our shipping and our shipping department. So we have an old guy, Pepito. We all respect him very much. He's 87 years old. This guy's strong as an ox. So I eliminated you know, we got these I don't know if you guys seen these little bubble things that they get inflated and then use them to pack your boxes. So I eliminated those and got that wrinkled paper machine. Oh my God, that old man was driving me crazy. It was 2 weeks, complaining, 14 days. So I finally threw the paper machine out and bought back the plastic machine because the old guy was killing me. But beside that, and plus we're using a lot more. But the guy was driving me nuts. But yeah, we're eliminating plastic as much as possible from our operation, Scott. Even the packing from Honduras, we use old newspapers when I'm sure you've gotten the old newspapers also over there, and in the UK when we ship stuff to you.
We recycle them. We recycle the newspaper issue. And
you do?
The UK retailers love reading about Honduras and Nicaragua when they get their delivery.
Right. No, listen. Yeah, we are mindful of so many of these things, you know, and we have to be responsible citizens. We're although I'm Honduran, I still feel like I'm a guest in this country. You know, part of what I wanted to do really was to invest in education and try to get these people educated, because Honduras has high level of teenage pregnancy, high level of alcoholism for teenage men and women, right? But the problem I was running into when we did that Windward factory here in Miami, we got 6 visas for our workers, and the problem I ran into was the guys would work for a month or 2 months and then they would disappear because they already had their visas. So that became a problem for us, keeping people working. And so then I'm moving more on the environmental side and try to regrow trees. And like I said, you know, we got a breast cancer center also. I mean, it's not ours. We have we pay the rent for a clinic so the breast cancer people can operate. And one of my goals for 2022, we're going to be to help them finance one of these mobile breast cancer units. Because imagine, you know, breast cancer, you know, the education that women in our countries have probably just started maybe 30, 35 years ago. And we were pretty ignorant about this stuff for many years, or women were. I mean, we don't know that much about it ourselves as men, right? But Honduras is just still, there's no education on it. So we've been helping out. We do yearly runs to get these women, to help these women. So it's just, Scott, if we don't implement these things, no one else will. And we have to start. But yeah, I do like
it's fantastic.
It's a huge benefit on plastic that we don't use cellophane. I agree.
The amount of plastic we throw away from the boxes that arrive from all over the world is unbelievable. because we have to unwrap every box to put health warnings and things like that on the boxes. So anyway, Christian, listen, I have to go now, but lovely to see you, and thank you very much for a really,
All right, Scott.
really
Thank
good
you, man.
night.
Thank you. Nice seeing you again.
Love to Alex, and we'll see you whenever.
I sure will, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Later.
Thank you.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us. Always
Thank
a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for being part of Bottom Up. Christian, you mentioned Wynwood, and I once had the pleasure of strolling through Wynwood, and it's certainly a super hip and colorful and art laden part of Miami. Do you get a little inspiration from that as well, or do you in general like take some inspiration from other disciplines like art and music?
Oh man, this would be a great time to lie and say yes, but no. I have zero ear for music, and I can't. I don't see art that way. But no, it was. I always wanted to have a factory in Miami, many years. So in 2011, we had the Honduran Cigar Festival, and that's where I met this kid, Robert Caldwell. And I said, I can't talk to you now officially because I'm under contract with Davidoff, but as soon as I'm ready, I'm going to call you because I want to do something. I want to do a factory in Miami. So I was going to do it in Calle Ocho, and I just thought he had an interesting personality, right? And he said, no, I know this neighborhood is called Wynwood, which I never heard of that place. And when we went to Wynwood, I was completely taken aback by it. I loved it. And he found this kid named Raul, which is now our marketing guy. Raul was an artist. He was a graffiti artist and just an artist. And they just went crazy doing graffiti inside our building, outside our building, our chairs, our rollers, tables. These artists would just paint on everything. And I remember that place was incredibly successful. And that's where we brought the rollers. Unfortunately, we just couldn't keep it going because of the visas. And then the city here, Miami, is very complicated with permitting. And they want us to get a bunch of different permits. And for us to sustain it, we had to get some sort of a beer or indoor liquor license. And that was getting paid also. It's going to be too expensive for a rented space. We had to put, I think the investment was going to be 350, 400,000 US for a rented space for, 4 or 5 year contract. And it really didn't really fit the model for what I was looking for. Plus we're just starting. And so that project ended and things didn't end well for Robert Caldwell at the time. It was just differences of opinion. And he went his way and we just closed the whole Wynwood operation. We moved back to a traditional warehouse.
Christian, I love the fact that you're such an outspoken, straightforward person and bringing the little competitive and sort of disrupting edge to the industry. I was wondering, is there a divergence between the professional Christian Eiroa and the family person Christian Eiroa?
It's pretty much the same, man. I had he actually just died last week. His name was Sergeant Singletary. We had this guy, and he was a sergeant in our military school. I went to his military school in Georgia called Riverside Military Academy. And one of my first days of military class, and as you can imagine, military school was no fun. It's not like you see in the movies. It's not like that movie. What was that Tom Cruise movie called? Whatever. I forget the name right now. So,
Top Gun, you mean?
Oh, what was it called, man? Taps. Yeah, Taps. It was called Taps. So there was a lot of discipline. So, and listen, please forgive my language, right? So he goes, gentlemen, when you guys do something in life, be the best or be the worst. People remember the best and they remember the screw ups. They don't remember anybody in the middle. And I definitely didn't want to be the worst or one of the screw ups. So I always lived by that guy, by his words. And I've always thought I have 3 boys. Fortunately, I was very fortunate to get 3 boys, 18, 16, and 14. And I teach them the same thing also. You got to be competitive. You can't be, they're very much into sports. My oldest one is into baseball and he's going to university this year. He was up for the draft. He still might, but then everything changed with COVID. So we're not going to have the draft like you normally do. And the other 2 are also into sports as well, basketball and football for the youngest one. So very, very similar in my personal life, extremely competitive. Yeah, of course you become passive and you just can't compete that much in that many things anymore without getting hurt or getting a swollen knee, So, but yeah, I try to teach them to my boys and try to be competitive. So thank you for that question.
Do you see any of the boys joining the family business as well?
I think they like it. I think they like the industry a lot. And the hardest part, because they see the fun side, right? Because they go to trade shows, and what I'm trying to teach them is, there's a saying in Spanish, is to figure out how the water gets in the coconut. So now I'm trying to teach them cómo entra el agua al coco. So I'm trying to teach these guys, look, I mean, it's fun here, but you guys have to go to the farm now, in the factory, and see how things really happen. And that to them is like, wait a minute, Bobby, there are no girls on the farm. I go, no, there are no girls on the farm. There's only work. So it really their lifestyle very much right now to go down to the farm. But I'm trying to teach them that. They'll get it. And but yeah, they do like the business very much. Fortunately, I hope we can keep it going for a fourth generation.
It's great to also hear some of the family stories, and I truly and tremendously enjoy our conversation and this wonderful session. And thank you for everything that you're sharing with us. It's an absolute pleasure to hear a little bit more about your work and your personality. And I just want to invite all the people watching us tonight, be it on Facebook or here at the lounge, yet again, if you have any more questions, please put them in the box or send us a direct message or put a comment down in the box. And I have one final question.
I have a question for you, actually.
Oh, please do.
Do you have, without revealing any internal information, do you have any news on Intertabac?
Not yet. No. The last information that I had was that plans were still up and running, and what we heard last was that the plan is still ongoing for Intertabac to be running as usually, but maybe somebody else has new updates, but that's at least what I've heard the last.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sabine or Johan, did you have any new updates on that?
I heard yesterday that there are planned 2-3 other conventions before the Intertabac in the Westfalenhalle. So I think the parameter will be how these conventions work. If they are taking place, the Intertabac will be held this year. I think there's not a plan, or not. I haven't heard that it will be canceled this year.
Mm-hmm.
So far. Maybe I think they have to find a decision end of August, beginning of September, but actually it's not canceled, and all the 2 other trade shows before are not canceled yet.
But does Germany go back to normal within the next few days, restaurants and everything?
I would ask Annemarie. She's here in the chat. Maybe she has more information about Germany. I mean, we do, as we talked before, we will reopen and start, especially 15th of May will be another big day. Maybe you can ask Annemarie if she's still here.
Well, so far, I don't have any news about the Intertabac as well. I don't know anything yet. Well, Germany is slowly getting back to normal, but yeah, I don't know how the future is gonna be. So can't really say anything for sure for now.
Yeah, I'm thinking Germany. If Germany's going back to function as normal, I'm thinking that they will have the fair, which is challenging.
Maybe I mean they canceled the Oktoberfest now, so I don't know if there will be any big events until the end of the year. I don't know. I can't say anything.
Also, I think the issue is not just whether Germany in general will be fine or not, but the question is really, can all the guys from the US and from the other countries make it to Intertabac?
Yeah, it's a challenge, man. We have no customers. Can't go.
We'll see. Well, we're hoping for the best, and hopefully this current situation and the crisis will soon bring us back to a more normal life yet again.
It's been hard. It's been. There are little things that you don't think about, right? So in the U.S., we're very fortunate that we were able to get help from the government here, which we all hated. I mean, in general, all the stores I talked to and all of my colleagues and competitors I talked to, everybody hates having to take it. But we're probably going to get a tax increase or something. So we either take it or you end up paying for somebody else's. But in Honduras, we didn't receive any benefits at all. So we have, 675 people there that we've been paying for 5 weeks now or 6 weeks. And the only way we've been able to justify it, and here's the crazy thing, the government hasn't given us any incentive. So the only way we're able to justify, which is unfair to the workers now, is all these are being discounted from vacation days moving forward. So normally if there was, I don't know, May 1st is Workers' Day, right? So May 1st, people would have to work through May 1st or any holidays, Christmas, New Year's. So it's really unfair for them. But, there really is no proper answer. And that's what happens when you're in these countries that don't have, they're not big countries or big economies, right? So, but it's been challenging all throughout. But hopefully Honduras opens within a couple of weeks safely. I mean, we're not going to do it until we fully retrofit our entire operation.
Yeah. I fully agree, and I also saw your video statement on YouTube yesterday, I think, yeah. And we even shared it on the Cigar Journal Facebook page, so you can take a look there. And great that you're doing all that, and please keep us posted on what's going on down in Honduras as well. Andre from Gothenburg actually commented that in worst case we will do a Zoom Intertabac. We're working on something, so light them up. Most certainly will continue even long after this whole Corona crisis, and we'll certainly figure out some way to get people connected and get people together.
Hey, I love Gothenburg, man. I had a great time. Got a great time with stock, everything. I had a good time over there. Those guys were very, very nice. Sweden was awesome too, man. I had a good time there. I had good hosts also.
Christian, one final question. We spoke about that quote of yours at the beginning of what would you do differently if you had to start all over again. And I was wondering if you were to give your 16-year-old self an advice for life, what could that be?
Man, it's funny because I sit here and I just had a conversation with my son, I don't know, 5 days ago. And I remember telling him, listen, his name is Christian also. I'll be 48 in July this year. I said, Christian, I might be 47, but that 18-year-old and that 16-year-old is still inside me. That guy is still there. So whatever stupid shit you want to come up with or whatever dumb things go through your mind, I already thought about it and I did it. I can already tell you exactly what's going to happen. I know what the end is going to be. But I think I would tell myself to keep making the mistakes and have fun doing them, man. Because there's nothing like you can explain something to somebody a million times, but it has to happen to them. I'm a big believer. I enjoy mistakes. I think mistakes are funny. I get a kick out of them. And even in business, I love coming out with a product and I do something wrong. I just look at myself and I laugh. Obviously you repeat the same mistake more than twice, then that the mood kind of changes. I'm not so happy anymore. But yeah, I would tell myself to just keep going and be as dumb as you want to be and make all the stupid mistakes you want to make. There's no sense in correcting it because, you're going to learn something. If you don't make mistakes, you're not going to learn anything at all.
I think that's a wonderful statement to finish off the call. Christian, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, man. Thanks a lot, guys.
To have you on the call, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing a cigar with you super soon.
Super soon, man. Good luck, guys. Take care.
All the very best to you and to all of you guys. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining. Guys. Be safe, and hopefully we'll all see each other again on Sunday, where we will be back with another Light 'em Up session. And Sunday is going to be super, super interesting as well. We have Matt Booth joining us from Room 101, and plenty of fun and interesting stories to be shared then. So join us again Sunday, 8 p.m. Central European Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. And I'm looking forward to having you all again. Thank you so much and take care.
Bye. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
And see you.